So, at this point, I think that we all know bacteria can cause diseases in humans. Interestingly, all of the known pathogenic bacteria that we are familiar with are members of domain bacteria. There are currently no known disease causing archaea. And that's likely because, in order for bacteria to evolve the ability to infect humans, they have to be alongside humans. Archaea and humans do not occupy the same environment on the Earth, as archaea are extremophiles, right? And so they're living in the bottom of oceans or in geysers, very hot places. So there's not a lot of opportunity for interaction between archaea and humans, whereas bacteria are living in the same environment and so have had the chance to interact with humans and the ability to kind of evolve ways to become pathogens. And so whether or not we really knew it, bacteria have been causing disease in humans for thousands of years. And so you can see here some kind of large plagues that actually were caused by what we now know as bacterial infection. The most famous of which, at least the one we probably talk about the most, is the bubonic plague in the 1300s, which is also sometimes referred to as the Black Death. You can see a hand of a patient who has the bubonic plague up here in this image, and that bubonic plague killed about 100 million people in Europe in the 1300s, and it was caused by a bacteria that was carried in fleas on top of rats. And as is important to note, this picture was taken in 2012, so that bubonic plague and the bacteria responsible for it is still existing today, but it does not have the devastating effects it once did. And so there are a lot of diseases that are caused by bacteria, and it's more than likely that you've had at least one of these diseases in your lifetime. Strep throat is a particularly common one, bacterial disease. Food poisoning is caused by bacteria. The sexually transmitted diseases, chlamydia, gonorrhea, as well as some others that are probably less common, like tuberculosis, cholera, typhoid fever. The bubonic plague is listed here. And the reason you have had these diseases and have not succumbed to them is because of antibiotics. And so an antibiotic is a chemical produced by another organism that's hostile to the growth of a particular organism. So what does that mean? It means that most antibiotics are chemicals produced by bacteria that are harmful to the growth of other bacteria. And the first antibiotic that was discovered in 1928 by Alexander Fleming, who you can see here on the right. And the way that this discovery happened was sort of by accident. And so he was working with a bacteria called Staphylococcus, which you can see streaked out on this plate in a diagonal pattern down here. And what he unfortunately had happened to him was basically a contamination of his plates with mold. It's particularly this penicillin fungus down here, seen in white. And what he noticed was that in the areas where the plates were contaminated with mold, there was this sort of area of kind of no growth of that Staphylococcus bacteria. And he hypothesized that there was some kind of mold juice coming out of the penicillin fungus that could kill different types of bacteria. And many subsequent experiments after that, as well as the isolation of that mold juice and determination of what chemicals were in it, penicillin was sort of born. And penicillin is the first antibiotic. It's still used today to treat bacterial infections. And since then, we have also generated or discovered a lot of other antibiotics, a list of which you guys can check out here on Wikipedia. The list is very extensive. And some antibiotics are able to kill many different types of bacteria, and those are what are known as broad spectrum antibiotics because they kill a broad spectrum of bacteria. Whereas some antibiotics are very specific and can only kill one specific type of bacteria, and those are what are known as narrow spectrum. And so while antibiotics are really great for treating bacterial diseases by killing bacteria, there are some bacteria out there, in the case of these articles, a salmonella, and I believe a gonorrhea bacteria, that are becoming resistant to those chemicals or those antibiotics. And that evolving resistance means that these bacteria causing infection become harder and harder for us to kill, and it becomes harder for us to treat diseases caused by them. And so antibiotic resistance occurs when there are a high number of bacteria, as can be seen here in this figure 1, and a couple of them are resistant to the antibiotics. So those are the ones in orange. And you can use an antibiotic to kill most of these bacteria, as you can see here, right? So all of those blue bacteria were susceptible to that antibiotic, and they were killed by it after treatment. However, there's a couple of those resistant ones hanging around, and they're left over even after that antibiotic treatment. So they're still living within your body. And then they have the opportunity to reproduce and take over as that new population of bacteria. And they are resistant to treatment with antibiotics. And one unfortunate thing for us in treating disease is that a resistant bacteria that has a gene for resisting an antibiotic can actually transfer that gene really easily to a normal bacteria and make it resistant as well. Bacteria are really good at transferring their genes between individuals. And so antibiotic resistance occurs when we kill off most of the bacteria, but leave behind a resistant population that can expand and then pass its resistance on to other non-resistant bacteria as well. And we can contribute to this in several ways. One way is by not finishing a full course of antibiotics. So you can imagine that if you take your antibiotics and you felt like crap, and you start taking them, and you feel pretty good after the first day, and you feel really good after the third day. So you stop taking them because you're better from your infection, right? But there's technically like 6 more days worth of antibiotics you should be taking. And so in that first couple days, you've killed off the blue bacteria. But what you haven't killed off are these orange guys. And that's why it's important to always finish your course of antibiotics, because that first couple days worth will kill off most of the bacteria in your body. But it leaves behind the really strong ones, the ones that need a huge dose of antibiotic and many days worth of treatment. And those are the ones that become resistant and then can spread their resistance to others. So finishing our courses of antibiotics is really important. Additionally, we have been tending to overprescribe antibiotics for conditions that are actually viral. So viral diseases can't be treated with antibiotics. And just by having the bacteria in our bodies being exposed to antibiotics more and more, it gives them a higher chance of evolving resistance to them because they've seen this challenge to their life many times. And the ones that are strong will survive in the population, and then it will shift to being all of the strong ones or all of the resistant ones. And so as humans, we've been contributing to this crisis of antibiotic resistance by not finishing antibiotics, as well as kind of just through the overprescription and overuse of them to treat diseases that they actually have no power to treat, like viral infections. But microbes aren't all bad, right? So we do use microbes to our advantage in several different ways. The first of which is in food production. So microbes are essential in making certain dairy products like cheese and yogurt. They also are able to do fermentation, and so they're used to make things like sauerkraut or kimchi, which is seen here on the right. We've also started to use microbes in a process known as bioremediation. And bioremediation is just this idea of using bacteria to remove pollutants from the environment. And so some bacteria are really particularly good at growing in environments that are high in heavy metals, which is something that's really detrimental to humans. Some prokaryotes or bacteria are able to take pesticides in and convert them into something that is basically non harmful. Some prokaryotes are able to take in oil and digest it into a non toxic material. And there are actually some sort of kind of amazing microbes that can even digest plastic. And as we know, plastic and single use plastics have been causing a huge issue in the oceans, as well as the pollution of our land. And so it's possible that these sort of plastic eating microbes could help digest or get rid of some of that plastic to be used to clean up the oceans. Additionally, we already are using bacteria to clean up oil spills, as well as infestation of water with toxic metals like lead and arsenic and mercury, and infestation of water with pesticides and fertilizer runoff. So this bioremediation is something really cool that microbes can do for humans. And finally, we would not be able to live without microbes. And so you can see here is a picture of a human body on the right, and then the things you can't see about the human body, or all of the microbes that live on or in a human body, which is invisible to our naked eye but completely essential to our survival. And so a complete human would not be complete without all of the microbes living on our skin, in our gut, basically all over and all inside of our bodies. And there's this idea of mutualism, where this relationship that we share with the microbes on our body and inside of it benefits both of us. And in some cases, that's true. Bacteria will get nutrition from digesting the food that we eat, and we get the benefit of those bacteria doing the work for us. There's this also idea of commensalism in this relationship, where one of the organisms benefits and the other one doesn't really care. It's neither helped nor harmed. And so some of the microbes that live on our skin benefit from the food source and the access to other nutrients. And we don't really get anything out of that, but we're not harmed by it either. And so there are these mutualistic and commensalistic relationship between our human microbiome, or all of the microbes that live on and in us, and ourselves as hosts. And so it's important to remember that not all bacteria are harmful, and a lot of them are actually helping us. In fact, we probably, at this point, since we've been evolving together for so long, would not be able to live without them.